I'm very glad to say that we've made it.
Yeah.
We've made it down south. Been here in California for a few days. This is the one that I was particularly looking forward to. I've never been here to see anybody here, in fact, but to see you guys in particular was a particularly big thing for me. I know you've been here a fair few times. How many times have you been?
I think it's maybe my 5th or 6th time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to come to the events that you would do around NAMM time, and I even went to your old shop as well.
Yeah.
You know,
back in the day.
before, back in the day. Yeah, that was right when we became a dealer for the guitars and stuff. And yeah, it's amazing to see the changes and all the stuff that you're doing downstairs to really
Yeah, well, we came at what seems to be a very interesting time for you guys. We're not going to talk too much about what's going on out there, but Justin gave us the tour. Everything seems new and seems like there's a little bit more vigour in the guys out there working in the factory. And how has it been for you? Obviously, we won't talk about the pandemic, but of course that's had a huge impact. So how has it kind of settled into the new year for you guys now? How do you see it going forward?
Well, you know, I think that almost everybody experienced that big rise, and I don't know if everybody was just tired, they just wanted to stay home and play guitar, but for whatever reason, everybody is buying gear. And so, yeah, it's really hard to all of a sudden ramp up to those numbers. And now, of course, things are starting to come back down again. So, and this is what I knew what would happen. You know, you don't want to try and ramp up your production to meet those numbers, and there are plenty of people who did that.
Yeah.
And now when things are starting to level out again, they're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm very happy with the way we did it, and it just kind of worked out well for us. We definitely have a lot more orders than we did pre-pandemic, and that's the reason we've decided that we really need to increase our efficiencies, and we've been spending this past year doing that kind of thing. So
the layout of the factory's actually changed quite a lot, hasn't it, as well? And there's a few new walls and stuff down there that you've made new rooms and areas for sanding and finishing and things like that. And it seems like, you know, you're trying to get a more efficiency as an effort to try and get the back order down, I guess.
Yeah, and also to keep people happy, because after COVID, a lot of people got used to not having jobs, not really working all that much.
Yeah.
And so we really had to kick it up and make sure we're much more fully climate controlled, whereas before it was a little bit more open feeling. But you know, everybody's heated now, they have air conditioning, they have dust collection.
Some windows
There's
down there as well.
Yes,
it's like a less of a factory and more of a place that, wow, I really like working here. A lot more lighting. We added another spray booth, and we also rebuilt our spray booth. We also got a UV printer. You know, we're adding gear. We got another CNC as well, so now we've got 5 CNCs. So it's been a growth, but it's really been exciting and good, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of well, in all industries, but specifically in MI and guitar, you know, everyone saw that massive COVID bump in sales and stuff, and we saw it right at the start as well. You know, we was the week that the first lockdown was announced in the UK. I was moving house on the Friday, and you know, and you think, oh, we're moving into like this new home, I've got a new bigger mortgage, all this stuff, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, who's going to be buying guitars? And I think it just caught everybody by surprise, and like the lead times, and then obviously the shortages in electronics. You know, I was talking earlier, Kevin, about you know, all those sorts of things. How has that kind of affected production now on certainly like the Discovery delay?
I mean, the Discovery delay is a complicated product. I would say it could have easily been a rack mount unit, you know, years ago. There's a lot of chips in there, specialized chips, and you know, with all the ICs and the whole IC shortage and stuff, it definitely has put a huge challenge on developing it. But I think we've been trying to navigate those challenges, and I think we're doing okay. We're already sourcing the parts for the next run, so. You know, it's definitely changed the way we've handled things, and I think a lot of people probably have been trying to work on how they're going to change the way they do things. You know, with parts in the past were just available whenever you wanted them. It was like tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of this chip. I can buy them tomorrow, and now it's like 0 in stock, and the next
top dollar as well, price as well.
And the next they'll come back will be 2023, 2024. The lead times are crazy. I think they're getting better though, and hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's almost like you know, I think in human evolution we adapt to everything, so we're just trying to adapt to what we can get, and I think a lot of people have been having to redesign products to keep manufacturing them, and that's stuff that I've been having to do is make small mods and redesigns and board respins to keep things flowing. So this has definitely been a challenge, but it's almost kind of like the norm now. It's almost kind of like part of the...
well, COVID is part of, you know, everyday life now, isn't it? Basically, you know, it's not going away, so you have to be ready to adapt, I guess, a lot more to changes in availability of, you know, parts.
Right, that's it now. Draw a line under that. No more COVID talk.
Okay.
Well, it's all positive now.
I think it actually... Well, I'm not going to stop because it's. I think it's actually changed the way people, or at least me, the way I've designed products too. It's like if I know I need to do this function, am I going to use a special chip for that, or can I do it in a different way with chips that are more available? So it's. I think it's probably.
It's opened up your.
I can't speak for everybody, but I think probably designers and engineers are probably choosing parts that are more available and maybe doing it a little harder, maybe with more parts, but these parts are available versus this one chip that can do all these things, but I can't get.
You obviously have the ability to be able to work that out and figure that out. There's a lot of companies that make clones of things, or you know, or they're making their version of that. As soon as that part is no longer available, it's game over, isn't it? You know, they can't change that. So it's obviously testament to the knowledge and the experience that you've got, you know, in being able to make those changes. So
I think it is harder with things that are like vintage and clones because you know, you might get a certain chip that they just become obsolete, and then it's like, how am I going to get around that? You know, so it depends what you're doing. But I think for new products and maybe stuff that's not just direct clones or things, more digital or advanced things, there's a lot of ways to skin a problem. So it definitely has affected all that.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'd like to just jump back to the delay quickly, because I know you say you've kind of changed your way that you approach design as a result of what's happened. When you did that, though, it seemed like that was a real new direction in terms of your pedal designs compared to what you previously had already. So how was your vision then compared to how it is now? What was your goal when you set out with the delay? Because it's obviously a lot more complex than what you've done before. Did you have a kind of a series in mind, the way it was going to lead to next, maybe other products, or was it a standalone thing?
It was kind of, you know, it is a different form factor. I think the initial goal was to try and just create almost like a flagship analog delay that had features that I just wasn't seeing out there. And it's not like that they couldn't have been done. It was just kind of difficult and maybe not worth people's time and energy. You know, things like the millisecond display and BPM and things like that. It's not that it's crazy difficult to do, but I hadn't really seen it much or at all in other units, and I thought it would be pretty useful. Things with the MIDI syncing and all sorts of stuff. It was kind of one of those things where we wanted to build a delay, and it was always a toss-up of, do we just come up with something that's more simple, you know, that's more like what everything else is on the market, or do we try and do something that really push
the envelope a little bit.
Push the envelope, and you know, it took me probably around 3 years to when I started the design of that, and by the time I finished it, because I had to learn a lot to do it, and there was a lot of trial and error, a lot of board respins, you know, so I learned a lot in doing it, and it definitely pushed my capabilities after I completed. I almost think of it like a really hard college project, and by the time you finish it, you've learned all these things, and so it was a great project. In the end, it was very difficult for me, but I learned so much doing it that, you know, I think it will carry on into future products, and I think we'll be able to push the envelope on some new stuff in the future based off of things I learned from that, and some new toys we've been playing with, new parts we've been playing with recently too. Some cool, exciting parts that I'm excited to use on new product. Yeah.
He was really good at finding some chips like, oh, this is a brand new chip. Nobody's using it. There's a ton of them out there. Dad, I want to buy them all. Okay, buy them. So now he's got, you know, now he's got something he can work with that, you know, it just came out on the market, and he's just like, nobody's found this yet.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I never used to be like, hey, I think we should buy all these now, but now it's kind of like,
well, that's the experience of the last couple of years, isn't it? You know,
when opportunities come.
Yeah, you see 10,000 available. Okay, let's not worry about it. Next 2 days later, you go check, and there's 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a really. I've already kicked myself probably 4 or 5 times when I saw a part that was available, and then I was going to order it that weekend, and then by the weekend it got
It
bought
was
out.
like hours.
You got to be on
you
it
had to
quickly.
jump on
haven't you?
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've even had to email the manufacturer and be like, I was waiting on a quote for this part, and you never got back to me,
Yeah.
and now they're all sold out, and I can't get. Now your lead time is another year out, and I can't
Yeah.
wait that long.
No.
You know, so it's definitely different challenges. But I know you just got to adapt with it and try and figure out a way to work, because otherwise, what else is going to happen? You're
Yeah,
just
grinds to a halt. I mean, there's something that I kind of want to pull the curtain back a little bit between the dynamic between you two guys, because I think coming here today was quite revealing in that Suhr's one of those companies where it feels like it's a kind of a perfectly formed sphere of, you have your guitars, of course, amps and pedals, and yet there's not really a lot of information out there about who is responsible for which ideas, where the ideas come from, how they kind of come together and make the end product. So I guess you can only speak for yourselves, but do you guys feel that you often having conversations with each other about, no, I want to take care of this, no, Dad, I want to take care of this, or does it just let itself happen naturally?
I don't think we fight over that. Kevin's he's just a whiz at programming. Like I think I might even have said, well, do you think you could give the delay great memory, like where you can? He goes, yeah, I could do that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I really was never into that. I've always been more the guitar and tube amp guy. So like with the PT-15, for instance, I kind of basically told Kevin, here's the audio circuit. So this is channel 1, this is channel 2. Here you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You make it programmable. You put, because I asked him when we did that, could you assign an IR per channel? Because I don't think anyone's doing that. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, that shouldn't be hard at all. So he kind of made it happen. But he took care of the PT-15, things like that. Or whereas, I might do the Ombre, or of course the PT-100s, the SL68 was a challenge for Pete.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what the final view of the product is going to be, whether it is a vintage inspired, or it's something like the PT-15, which is Swiss Army kind of thing.
He's so hardcore vintage. He's like, he's like, I don't know. I kind of went from analog to digital, at least as far as delays go and things like that. And he just loves that vintage thing. Like, okay, so
go for it.
Let's go ahead with it. But
well, these days, implementation of bridging the two worlds is more important than ever. I think you guys probably do one of the best jobs out there of making products that do that. But with amps in particular, how do you feel the market is these days for amplifiers? Because obviously you make a lot of them, you sell a lot of them, and yet there's still always this kind of digital world that's lurking around the corner. I mean, have you ever felt inclined to move more in that direction, or do you feel you have the balance just right the way you are now?
Well, I think that's something that, DSP is something that Kevin's just starting to grasp. Where like recently he's gone, you know what, I can do DSP. He goes, I've been working on it, and so he's getting into the chips, and he's getting into the everything he needs to get into it. So I'm sure he'll get more and more into it. But I think the good thing about Kevin and I is like we spend every day together, and we're local to each other. So one thing we do is bounce ideas off each other, where I'll say, well, what about this? Well, that's not really a big seller. Like he might want to do a flanger, and I'm like, hey, he goes, no, Dad, I could really do a nice flanger chorus and something like this.
Oh, hey, there's at least 2 of us that will buy a flanger.
Yeah,
I'm telling him, I'm saying, I think
and you
fans
won't want
these
to pay
days
for it.
like these. I like flangers, phasers, things, and he's like, well,
Well, I keep my mind open, obviously, because I'm from a different era.
But your companies are like almost too big just to do like a little small release potentially of that kind of thing, unless you guaranteed to sell like 1,000 pedals or something.
It's going to require work, and we do all the CAD, and it's not. I don't think anything that he or I do really is could be simple, except for maybe a few tube amps.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is we bounce things off and we kind of argue about it. And, But the funny thing is like, oh, Dad, I just got this Tascam cassette recorder. I'm like, buying
I remember
that?
those. Yeah.
You know, it's like I couldn't wait to get rid of mine and get a nice larger deck. Or
Yeah, he's like going to the future, and I'm going to the past. I'm like buying old tape gear and old, stuff. But I like doing that because I feel like I understand where technology has come from, and then I go, oh, I like this thing about the vintage thing, but then I might want to add this modern aspect to it, and that's kind of what it was like with the analog delay. It's like I love the Bucket Brigade sound and all the filtering and all the intricacies and weirdness of it. But it'd be nice to have some modern features, like to save a preset or recall it from MIDI.
It's good because we're, as guitarists, a lot of us, we're always chasing, a sound or a vibe of something that was, 40, 50 years ago. But we all want to be able to do it at with no work.
You want instant, and you often have a terrible realization later in life. It happens like my age where I go, I mean, I just look back, but to answer your question, as far as the tube amps and the modelers, I mean, I own a Kemper, I own a Helix, I own the Quad Cortex.
Yeah.
I like them all and I hate them all.
Yeah.
Personally,
they just are a tool for a job, aren't they? That's what it feels like.
If I want to practice, I've gotten used to the Quad Cortex is probably my go-to, or the Helix.
Yeah.
And I'll just plop it on the desk, but the Helix is too big.
Yeah.
So I'll put the Quad there and I'll just go, this is very nice. It's pretty good. Because I used to have a Bradshaw rig. I used to be 22 spaces front and back. I had the full on system with an H&H power amp, 2 4x12s.
Awesome.
In a New York City loft.
And a bad back.
Well, no, you have to hire a cartage. I used to do a lot of gigs for free. It's like, well, would you do this gig? Oh, you got to cart my rig. It's going to be $500. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think this is the kind of thing that Kevin and I do talk about. It's like we try to figure out, well, how much, because obviously it's a danger to us if all of a sudden the modeler comes out that destroys all tube amps.
Yeah.
I just don't think we're there yet. No. And Kevin's got, I bounce a lot of these things off of Kevin to ask him what's the feasibility of this, because he knows about that world. He doesn't think it's going to happen very quickly. I mean, sure, I think that we could compete with a tube amp in a tonal guru kind of. Of course, you can take almost any modeler out there, go play 90% of the gigs, and nobody in the audience is ever going to hear a difference.
No.
But to me, it's the frustration of the guitar player is I play like shit unless I hear what I want to hear. And sometimes, I mean, I'm sure everybody's done that gig where you're like, I can't hear myself, I sound muddy,
or it's
where's
too
my
bright.
distortion, something's going on, do I have low power, blah, blah, blah. You're going to play terribly. But when you get to that gig and you go, oh my God, this is like,
rocking,
this sounds awesome, then you can shine. And so I always wanted to make gear that basically made up for my inadequacies of my technical ability. And so, I think, the public as a large has this disease where we like to blame our tools. It doesn't matter if you're a photographer or what you are, but a lot of guys will go out and buy this stuff and just not realize that, well, gee, I want the same guitar blah, blah, blah has. Well, you do. You have it. The rest of it's going to be up to you.
Right?
You have to put in that effort. But I have fallen into that trap, and it's probably the reason I do what I do, because I could never concentrate on my playing. I played for like 10 years in clubs, but I could never concentrate on my playing because the intonation's out. Or my amp doesn't sound good. Or why can't I get a clean channel and a dirt channel and have them both sound good?
I mean, is it, just to jump back to the amps a little bit, is there something, because you've always been the guy that you've had your hands dirty, you've had your hands up in the guts of vintage amps.
I still do mods.
Your whole life. And was there something that whether it was exploring digital products yourself or what Kevin has taught you about the programming side of things, is there something that was really profound for you that you recently discovered and kind of changed your thinking on everything you've done?
I think the main thing for me is that when I started designing and when I came out with the 3 Plus preamp back in the Bradshaw days and all that, I was trying to get everything out of the amp. To me, I hated pedals. I couldn't stand an overdrive pedal. I tried using it, maybe if I had a jazz chorus or something, a turbo overdrive actually sounded okay into that thing. But to me, it just never had that immediate punch. Because I kind of grew up playing in the 80s. And a lot of those guys, like, you go see these bands, they hit a guitar chord like Pete Townsend, and it's just like, bam,
in your
punch
face,
you in
isn't
the
it?
chest.
Yeah,
I actually think that a lot of guys in this newer age don't understand what it's like to play loud
No,
and proud on
no.
stage.
Oh, it's
And
a completely different experience.
Such a
isn't it?
different
Yeah.
experience. It's
Yeah.
like, it's kind of reminds me of the first day I was like a Gilmore fan, and I went into Manny's Music, and I'm like, I want a high watt.
Yeah.
I want a high watt. So I went into Manny's, and they had a high watt stack there, 100 watt stack, and this is back in the probably late 70s. And they gave me a guitar and they plugged me in, and I'm like, my Manny's Music on 48th Street. Hendrix bought shit here. It's like, you just realize how different of experience that is than sitting at a small volume and playing.
Completely different confidence.
Yeah, but and I think that's the hardest thing to capture from modelers.
Yeah.
You just can't get that air moving like that, and there's a different feel to me. Even though I work with them and I play them, and I think if you're a good guitar player, nobody will know the difference. But you will.
Yeah.
And that's why we haven't quite given up on the amp thing yet.
But I think that the perfect solution to all of that is products like the Reactive Load. That is like the perfect gateway for someone that maybe has grown up playing on modelers, and then goes to a real amp and you hear a cab in the room, like, if you're playing through a 50 watt amp with an EV speaker or something like that, it's going to have absolutely no prisoners at all.
Yeah.
But then you use something like that, and you can choose greenbacks, something nice and soft, but you still get that immediacy and the same feel, don't you? But you can have that wired up through your rig at home and stuff like that. So I think it's awesome that you've brought products like that to the market. So I would never use a modeler or a Kemper or anything like that, because I know what will happen. I'll spend 5 minutes playing and 3 hours tweaking.
Exactly.
So that's like, I get one of the big amps, put it through one of those.
And you're done.
Yeah, and then done.
It's funny you said about growing up, because I was a kid that grew up with a modeler too, and
I wasn't going to buy him an amp to blast.
Yeah,
in
he
the
didn't
house.
want me to play loud in the house. So I had a great modeler, but it was one of those things where I didn't have the bass line, because I wasn't playing with tube amps. I didn't grow up playing with tube amps, so I'm dialing through a bunch of menus, and I have a bunch of options like sag and all the things I didn't understand, and I was just trying to get a tone.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good, and then I'd play against some other record that I liked, and then it sounded like a million miles apart, and then I'm like, oh, I'm like way this way.
No.
Yeah, and different impulse responses you use are completely different, and over time, eventually, he let me have a tube amp, and it was kind of one of those things where I was just like, dial a few dials, I was like, oh, this sounds right, you know? So I think the modelers are getting quite impressive, and I think they've made super big leaps. I think the thing that's hard for new players is not having that bass line. I think if you had like a tube amp and you knew like what a good sounding tube amp sounds like and how easy it is, and you get used to that, and then you go to the digital thing, then you kind of know what to go for.
Yeah.
But when you start straight into the digital, it's kind of like, could be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of menus and options and software
you can get
upgrades.
pretty deep into the wrong side.
Yeah, you could go down a rabbit hole of a sound that sounds not even real anymore. It might sound very synthetic, and just because you've just never experienced the real deal. So it's like, how are you going to...
It's like give most guys a parametric EQ, and it's not going to be good unless they know exactly what they want.
Yeah. Also, the problem with the digital thing, and I don't want to, shit on it too much, because it is fantastic, but it doesn't break your balls like playing a proper rig does, because the proving ground is either on a stage or in a studio, and you may find that you're recording a track and the right tone for that track is an AC30 with no bass whatsoever, and that sound, if you put that into a modeler, that'll sound like shit by yourself. But you've learned the hard way by playing in the context of playing music, and that's kind of just not focused on that much anymore. Sometimes you listen to some records and isolated tracks, and the tone sounds horrible, and then you put it in the mix and it's perfect.
Distortion can't, the kind of distortion we're looking for can't really be predicted. So that's, I think, what's hard about a modeler when it comes to distortion and effects, delays. That's all that stuff's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just that core. I even had, I took a Bella one day, and I took a popular modeler, and it had black face front ends, and I kind of went, well, I won't tell anybody I'm doing this, but I'm going to use the modeler as the front end, and I'm going to use my Bella as the power, and I've got 2 bellas sitting there, so I was like, this is just a beautiful old man setup. I can have anything I want, just sit up here and play, and I'm coming out stereo.
Yeah.
I couldn't find one preamp that sounded as good as the Bella.
No.
So then I went and all I was trying to do was learn comfortably numb.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to sit down and learn comfortably numb correctly.
Yeah.
You know, and so then I took I tried, okay, forget it. I'm just going to put the modeler in front of my Bella, and it's just a pedal board.
Yeah.
And I have a nice pedal board, but I'm just trying to, I don't know why.
Keep it simple.
You're always trying to do it with something else.
Yeah.
So I try to get everything to work through that, and I'm like, I've been sitting on this carpet for 4 hours, and I still don't have a tone that I want to learn comfortably numb.
I still can't play it.
So I just took a Riot, and I plugged it, because I was trying to figure out what's the problem.
Yeah.
So I took a Riot, and I put it in front of the modeler, so I'm still going through the whole modeler. It was fine.
Done.
Then I put the Riot in the loop of the modeler, and I went, okay, now I can practice.
It's all about having the tools that make you comfortable. You know, it may be wrong. It may not be what represents a recorded tone or something. You know, it may be completely the wrong amp circuit. But if it's making you comfortable, you're going to deliver way better results than
you're going to play better
than even if you're playing the right gear.
But Kevin tells me it's all about being, linear LTI and
linear time invariant. Well, like digital circuits really excel at all time-based things and stuff. Trying to create a digital delay, you can't really do. Probably the closest thing you could get to that would be a real tape delay in terms of trying to get the whole frequency response high, the complete high end, or like a looper. You know, it's like you're not going to have an analog looper. No. There's certain things that digital just excels at.
Yeah.
The thing that I think has been the strongest or the most difficult thing for DSP to excel at has been saturation, overdrive, distortion, tube.
I think it's
those
that middle ground sound. I think like the really cleans and then the really high gain sounds are good. It's the
in between.
Yeah, like like you were saying,
that's hard with amplifiers too. That rely on more preamp distortion instead
especially
of
modern channel switching amps. And you take an amp like a Badger 18 and put everything at halfway, and you just hit a chord on it, and that's the sound, isn't it? It's just there. But a lot of amps are, either very clean or, like you say, super high gain, and then it's hard to get that.
And that's something I learned back in the studio as a kid. Is like when I had my Bradshaw rig and I went and did a studio, and I just didn't. It was a digital studio, and we were used to recording on analog, and I'm like, oh God, the guitar doesn't sound right. And let me have the mics. Let me place the mics. So I placed the mics so it sounded great in the room. Okay, it sounds a nice room sound. This is what I'm used to. And I printed all my effects like an idiot because I had my Bradshaw rig, and that's what Lukather does. He's just prints everything, and he's done. It came down to mix down, and I had a keyboard player I was fighting with. If I was the loudest person in the band, it would be fine, but I wasn't. There was a keyboard player who was the singer. And by the time I got to mix down, I sounded like a mosquito.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that. I was too dirty.
Yeah. You don't have the bandwidth anymore.
Yeah, I had too much overdrive, too much effects, and I just got buried because they couldn't put me up.
No.
I mean, in terms of products, I think that the one thing that always gets forgotten is the speaker. And that's why, obviously you've done a lot of work with IRs to make that reality of just having that physical problem of a loudspeaker. You've kind of made it work in way more situations. And forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think you guys have ever made an attenuator of any sort.
No.
Is that kind of the reason for that? And do you ever see that you may do that in future if you can find a way to work the speaker part of the formula out?
Well, the speaker part of the formula is worked out in the reactive load, and that's what makes ours different than most. But really, the reactive load was my introduction to IRs and talking to Pete and things like that. And once I understood the concept of IRs, I thought, well, what good is it if you're going to have to listen to this blazing cabinet? Yeah. And this kind of goes back into the 80s where I learned this, is that the impedance curve of the speaker cabinet affects the frequency response coming out of your amp. So if you put a line out on your amp and you loaded it down with different speakers and cabinets having different impedance curves, your line out would sound different for each one of those because it is manipulated. Not tremendous, but we've all experienced running into like a load resistor and listening to that compared to a reactive load. But so my frustration with a lot of the people starting to do reactive loads is they weren't actually modeling the true impedance curve of a speaker. And during that time, actually, we had Jim Kelly here, who's into physics, and he's into the whole deal. And so I kind of like tasked Jim with, let's do a reactive load that really looks like a speaker. Like your amp just doesn't know it's not a speaker. And so that's what we worked on for that. And I think it is a game changer because for most of us, like, I don't know what you guys are like at home, but I've got a wife. And so, you know, my studio is like a cubby hole in the upstairs part, you know, where, you know, I've got a wall behind me. There's no way I'm miking anything up there.
Right.
So the reactive load for me is perfect. Yeah. You know, it's like
and you would probably get better results than miking up as well. Anyway,
you can get
way better.
I could get better results than I could get. You know, and if you go, well, I can get better results in my studio. Okay, go do your own IR.
But then you're dealt with the grim reality of having to record something that you're happy with when you're playing, aren't you?
Well, that's you know, we're all trying to avoid that. You know, we're just trying to get the tone.
The tone's not right. I can't do it. I'm not there.
Yeah, that's how a lot of our videos go, actually, isn't it?
I go into the studio and go, right, no, I'm not actually doing a video today.
I think it's also really important too what we did with the reactive load and mimicking that, because when you I think too many people design reactive loads to sound the way they want to hear them, but they don't take in consideration what that's doing to your amplifier.
Yeah. So you're trying to paint the final picture.
Yeah.
Without actually appreciating how you get to that picture.
Well, not only that, but the dangers of what you're putting on your amplifier, because your amplifier really needs to be loaded correctly.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I remember I used to have plexis, and I would blow one speaker, and all of a sudden I'd take out two speakers before I knew what happened. Then my amp would have no load, and I'm going like this, and poof, there goes my tubes or my output transformer. Your amp really wants to be loaded correctly. But that's what we've done with that. Is it's really indistinguishable, you know, if you look at the impedance curve of the reactive load. But some people will do what we call a bathtub curve, and the reason they do that is because it's cheaper, and they can get they can use a smaller enclosure. Like, we actually had to calculate what the enclosure was going to do, because we have inductors in there that are reactive with what's surrounding them. So some people go, can't you make it smaller, rack mount it? And I'm like, nope, it won't work the same. I could do it, but it's going to be a different box. So, but yeah, I think, and then we started putting that into the PT15, because we could use, it's actually almost identical. The funny thing is the reactive load in the PT15 is almost, it basically is the exact same impedance curve as as the big boy, just can't handle as much wattage.
Is it kind of more fine-tuned for that specific amp circuit?
Or just that power stage?
It's really the cabinet. I have like a golden cabinet I like downstairs. It's an old custom audio cabinet, which is like a sturdy, straight Marshall 4x12 type of design, maybe a little bit nicer built, and then greenbacks, Chinese greenbacks. I just love them. The old Chinese greenbacks. I used to get them from Scott Henderson. He go, I've been using these for a year. He goes, I can't use them anymore. I'll take them. They're nice and broken in and. So that's kind of everything we did with that. We basically went from my cabinet, because that's the cabinet that I use to test every amplifier and to tune in every amplifier. And then I'll go backwards and say, okay, but I can't sell guys a 4x12. I need to make it a combo. So now I'll go back and try and design a combo cab that sounds as close to that 4x12 as I can get.
Sure. Okay, so it's kind of switch lanes a little bit here. You've recently unveiled the whole configurator side of things, and I'm curious as to how you guys see yourselves as, do you kind of see it more as you're still a custom shop in nature, or are you more kind of going into a more steady stream of production these days, and then the configurator obviously makes that whole thing a little bit harder because you've now got all these other options to consider. Where do you kind of see yourselves now as, are you more of a custom shop, or you're more kind of straight ahead?
Everything we do is a custom shop. Unlike other places I worked in, the custom shop was a separate part of the company. It's the exact same builders making somebody's guitar. It doesn't matter if they're getting a core line or whatever they are getting. We got the same guys doing the same thing. So everything, and a lot of people don't understand that, you know, it's like I'll see comments, oh, you don't make enough fat necks. And well, sure we do. But the dealer has to order it. And the dealer's going to order based upon what
what they think customers want.
What do you think your customers are about?
And like the modern pros and standard pros, they give us a fantastic opportunity for a customer to just come into the store and go, yeah, I want to check out Suhr. Yeah, great. That's got like, you know, HSS what I wanted that colour, you know, and it's different if they come in and go, yeah, everything's great about it, but I want a V-neck, or I want, you know, no pick guard or something like that. So I think having the custom configurator plus, you know, the Modern Pro, Standard Pro, and all those guitars, you know, you've got the, well, you can still sell a guitar to a customer, basically, at the end of the day, because those guitars are so good off the shelf spec-wise, aren't they? So,
yeah, it's, you know, I think we're always a custom shop. It can be frustrating because if something happens to a neck or something, you can't just grab another one and bolt it on. It's got to go through the process again. It's got to go through the dry time, the cut, and especially if it's a matching figured headstock. Okay, you know, it's a nightmare. But I kind of figure that that's what we do different. Is, you know, we will do within our menu. We will custom build you what you want.
And I think a lot of the customers, you know, perhaps we need to do a better job of when we're talking to our customers about it, but how much handwork and, you know, and final detail goes on down there as well. You know, it's the guitars, the end product is so shiny and polished and beautiful that I don't think people really get.
We need to draw the curtain back a little bit. Like
a little bit. Same with the amps, you know, we were talking about earlier. You know, it takes a day and a half or whatever it was to wire up an SL67, and that is a absolutely beautiful work of art. When you see that down there and he's sitting there, you know, working on that amp, you know, you could see the pride that he had in it. He was like, yeah, I really want to get it looking like the ultimate, you know, that's the benchmark one in front of me. Yeah. It's got to be as good as that, you know. And because the products are, you know, are so good and everything is, you know, comes to us and it's playable out the box and sounding amazing. You know, we need to do a better job, I think, with that, you know, just telling people how much more goes into the guitars as well.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult, and I understand, you know, a lot of people don't want to buy a guitar sight and seen, and I don't blame them. But I think they'll usually be happy with ours.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we get very, very, very few returns on Suhr guitars, and it's normally, you know, any returns are, you know, it's too heavy, or it's, you know, it's can't get it low enough, the action height. And you're like, what?
You know, the heavy thing is something that is kind of interesting because it's not the guitar that's heavy.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, or it's not the woods that are heavy. It's usually things like the bridge.
Yeah.
Our bridge is almost a half a pound.
Yeah.
The SSC is a wonderful device.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's pushing up there. It's a little heavier than a humbucker with a cover dipped in wax. You know, so it's got some weight. So if we took out the SSC and used a zinc block, we'd be 7¼ pounds all day long.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make a better guitar.
No.
It doesn't make a better sounding guitar. Maybe it's easier on your shoulder, but
you don't get a dead leg.
Well, I mean, outside of the subjective thing of some people just like to have a light guitar for comfort.
Yeah.
How important do you actually think it is, the weight? Is it something that you really strongly consider with your designs, or is it just whatever it's going to be, it's going to be?
It is, and we're always looking at it. I mean, you know, right out of the gate, just so people know, we reject more than half of our wood just by weight. You know,
really?
Right out of the gate. It's like, no, can't use that, can't use that. So, but you know, there's some woods that are really beautiful and really nice. So maybe we'll come up with some options. Like I don't even have one of my signatures yet, but I need to make one. But I have a Limba T, and it's so light, and yeah, it doesn't have a lot of bass. I kind of think that what happens is it's not weight. It's not like, you know, a light basswood sounds this way, and you know, heavy mahogany sounds this way. I think it's more about the relative weight compared to what the species normally has. So if you've got an ash body, and you know, some ash can be, you know, southern swamp ash and be super light, and some can be heavy, you know, northern ash,
heavy,
like an Eddie Van Halen kind of thing. And that's kind of funny. Is a lot of my heroes, I later found out, played very heavy guitars. I will say one thing. When I was at the Big F, I made a guitar for a guy who just wanted a light guitar, and I just picked up this piece of wood that was like, it's like air. I'm like, okay, there we go. And I made him a guitar out of that. I can't remember the weight, but it was ridiculous. It was so light, had no bass. No bass. I think if we're playing, you know, in the small degrees, like somewhere in between 7 and 8 pounds, you know, and if it's all the wood is the same, so if we're dealing with the same, exact same woods, exact same build, and like we talk about, everybody likes to talk about, wood matters. It doesn't matter as much as some people might say, but because there's a lot of things, everything, it's like cooking a meal, you know.
Yeah, all the ingredients.
All the ingredients matter. But the lighter woods tend to have a little less bass, and so more perceived mid-range. And maybe sometimes if it's not a hardwood, it might have a little less highs. Of course, all that stuff is dependent on your pickups, and really hardcore is the bridge and the truss rod. I think make a tremendous, the neck and the truss rod and the bridge, they all make tremendous amount of tone
Especially
difference.
the weight of that block as well.
And that's the other thing is, like, you know, I've used zinc blocks, you know, for many years, and there's something just doesn't sound solid about them or real. When I have a nice steel block on my bridge, I know it's making my guitar a little bit heavier, but gee, when I hit those strings, it just ring.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I want to hear, that kind of clarity of ring. Like, it sounds like you've always got new strings on, because you can always take high end off.
That's right. Yeah, you can't add it back, can you?
Or you can always take bass out. You can't add it if it's not there. Same thing with highs, or anything really. It's got to be there.
Great answer.
You're better off being subtractive than you are trying to add things that don't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of find, for me, I'm happy with anything in between 7.5 and 8. You know, unless it's something that's designed to be stupidly light, like something a thin line or you know, something like that.
Yeah, but you still see a merit to heavy guitars, or?
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at it this way. I played a three pickup Black Beauty 68 for probably 5 years, and the club band.
£10 or something like
that. Yeah, it's primarily what I used. And then I had a Les Paul Jr., and I just had a big, wide strap. That guitar must have been easy 9 pounds. You know what I mean? And today it's like, oh, it's 9 pounds.
Bad guitar.
Yeah,
That's a bad guitar.
We didn't know any better, and that guitar sounded great. And you know, I'm sure Peter Frampton's was just as heavy.
Yeah.
It comes down to the whole package, though. Like you said, I mean, it's something I've never ever paid attention to personally, outside of the initial, oh, this thing's really heavy or really light.
But I see it right at the, you know, right at the front, because we're talking with customers, and you know, an amazing. It's sad to see how many amazing guitars have been written off because it says half a pound too heavy on the scales.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's like on 48th Street, I worked in sales too. We would go, hey Johnny, you know, I'm too busy, come downstairs, and I would see it all the time. People would pick up a Schecter off. You know, this is back when Schecter was the original Tom Anderson, you know, early Schecter. But a lot of those guitars were heavy because they used a lot of exotic woods. And I think that's where people have to realize what they're asking for. So if you want me to give you a Cocobolo neck and you want the solid quilt maple body, you know, chances are this is going to be a heavy guitar.
Yeah.
But I remember people would pick up a guitar and, oh, no, it's too heavy. You know?
Yeah, well, I think it's 100 times worse than that now as well, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, I think back then it was more about, oh, you know, I got some arthritis in my back. You know, like I built a guitar for the what's his name, from the Eurythmics. But he had a really bad back, and it was back in the 80s. And
Dave Stewart.
Yeah, I think I made it out of spruce because he wanted it as light as possible. He didn't care what it sounded like.
Yeah.
He just wanted it light.
And I guess if a lot of guys are using modelers and things like that now, everything can be done post to get it kind of where they want it to be. But
well, you know, and I also think that a lot of guys don't realize, and anybody who's recorded in the studio realizes that the sound that you get sitting here playing and listening to your guitar is not what you should be doing in the studio.
No.
It's like, you know, sitting here, whether it be distortion or like kind of my story about the effects, sitting here, you're going to hear one thing. It doesn't mean it's going to work in the mix.
No.
It's like I even saw Pete Thorne playing with, I think it was Don Henley, and one guy had a small little Fender amp and Pete had his stereo rig, and I had to tell Pete, you know, I don't know if stereo
is the right.
I said, I'm sorry, but I think you got lost.
Yeah.
Because they just turn him down because he's stereo. He's got such a wide spread.
Yeah.
Where the other guy using like a small
through.
deluxe, you know, all mid-range.
Yeah.
That's the guitar you really heard.
Yeah.
But it's all context, right? Because, you know, I love Pete's playing because he's not scared of treble. Right. And you know that in most situations he plays in, you always hear a lot of treble. and it works perfectly for that cut. And then you listen to someone like Scott Henderson, who hardly has any trouble.
Right.
But it's all about the context of how those guys play. So there is no right answer, is there?
Well, and Scott's going to be the loudest guy. So if you're in, Pete might be a sideman where he's, so you gotta shift your thinking. But I think the funny thing is a lot of guys think that this sound that works here sitting down, and it used to happen to me every night at rehearsal. I'd sit on the carpet, I'd dial up my Bradshaw rig. Okay, I've got every song, I've got the chorus, I've got the lead, I've got everything.
Everything
the band
works
comes
out.
in and starts playing, and you go like, everything's wrong. I gotta go redo everything.
No.
So I'd like to ask a question to both of you in turn. I'll start with you, Kevin. Given that you've now uncovered so much and you sort of alluded to things that you might be working on in the future, what is it that still excites you about guitar design, electronic design? What is it that you're looking for next that you want to implement?
Oh, good question, Jack.
Thank you.
I think in terms of, I'm always still a lover of vintage sounds and circuits. And I think what excites me is some of the new parts I've been playing with, some of the new code I've been writing. I think I could make cool new products using some of these new parts and still try and get those vintage sounds and just try and make things easier in terms of like some new features. Sometimes new features can be more complicated for someone that's just used to stepping on a pedal and turning a few knobs.
Yeah.
Things like programmability and displays or whatever it is, MIDI. But I would like to make new products that implement some of those new features with the old sounds, but are still just user-friendly, very intuitive. That's always kind of my main goal. And so, yeah, I think I've been playing with some new parts, and I'm kind of excited to use them on some new products and some new ideas with trying to shrink the amount of gear that you would need to do a certain thing. That would be helpful, like switching and stuff like that. So
Like solution type.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for new solutions and how we can get a pedal board to be, I could still kind of have it programmable, but maybe not need like a big looper or things like that. I'm always trying to find ways of like, well, I want to do this, but I don't want to add this, this, and this, and spend all this time
making things more complicated.
doing a bunch of programming. So I could maybe offload that on the user and do more complex programming on the inside, but in the end make it easier for the user.
Yeah, so you're doing the work yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to offload the amount of difficulties on the user by kind of just programming it in there and trying to make the user interface as user-friendly as possible. So someone that might have been scared of using something like MIDI or a programmer looper kind of thing might just be able to push a button and program something and be like, oh, okay, I saved a sound that's not hard, I might enjoy this, or something like that. So
I think that's really important that people need that because it's a very different world now, guitar-wise,
So that's what happens to modelers too.
Yeah.
It's like I joke with my friends and say, with my Bradshaw rig, 22 spaces front and back was easier to run than my modeler. So I just turned on what I want.
Yeah, it's a tactile thing.
Yeah. So some of my stuff wasn't MIDI. It's like you had Van Halen's wasn't MIDI. You got delay on left, delay on right. That's what you got. There's your preset.
Yeah.
You want to change it, you got to go like this.
Yeah, or yell at somebody. So what about you, John? What still excites you the most?
I'm just excited to improve product and improve the way things are done every day. I'm always trying to think of why, and it's kind of like why I got into the business. Is I was never happy with anything. Doesn't matter if it's a guitar or anything. I'd get a stereo, I'd pick it apart. I used to race motorcycles. First thing I did is learn how to take them apart and work on them. And gee, what can I do to make it faster, lighter? And so that was my whole thing with guitars. Is like that's like why I started making guitars, is because somebody destroyed my guitar. I never got into this business to be a manufacturer of products. I thought I was going to play guitar, but everything would disappoint me. Oh, well, this guitar doesn't play in tune. Why not? So I'd figure out why, and I'd fix it. And so I eventually got jobs that encouraged me to go that direction. And that's everything I did. The reason I got into amplifiers is because I had my Bradshaw rig. I had everything that he suggested that all the guys used. I had
the greatest hits.
I had all the greatest hits there. I had the Jose Marshall. I had the preamp that everybody was using. I had everything. I didn't like any of it. So I was just like kind of confused.
Yeah.
And one day Bradshaw called me and he goes, "So how you liking everything?" And I said, "I love the rig. I'm just not happy with my core tone." And I said, "But I modified some Marshalls that I really like." And he was like, "What?" And then so he said, "If I send you a Marshall, would you mod it for me?" And I said, "Sure." So I sent it back to him, and Lukather loved it. And I was like, and he goes, "I want you to make something for me." He goes, "If you'd be game." And so he talked me into making the 3 Plus preamp. And so I guess that the original layout, you know, was his idea, even when it goes back to the other one that came before mine. But that whole layout was his thing, because he was doing all this work for Lukather, and he goes, "Well, he doesn't need all these amps. Let's make him a preamp." So that whole 3-row deal. So, because I felt guilty about that in the beginning. I'm like, "Oh, it looks like something else." And he goes, "Yeah, well, it's my layout.
Yeah.
So you don't have to feel guilty." I'm like, "Okay." So I did that, and that's kind of what pushed me to get out of New York. Bob was like, "Yeah, okay, Landau likes it, Lukather likes it. I've taken like 50 orders for these things at $1,800 a pop." He goes, because initially I was supposed to stay in New York, he was going to stay there, and he was going to make the preamp, and we'd have like this cross country business. And he says he couldn't do it anymore. He goes, "Got too many orders." He goes, "You got to come out." I'm like, okay. So that's what brought me out to California.
So would you say you've kind of uncovered everything you want to uncover by this point, and
Oh,
now you just
hell
want to run
no.
your company?
Oh, hell
Or
no.
you're still...
Yeah, people
you're still
ask me when
searching?
I'm going to retire. I say when I'm unable to work. That's when I'll retire. I've got ideas for new guitars in my head. The only thing that with me though, where I get criticized for, and I'd like to break away from it, is to come up with something that's got a little bit more of an original shape. But the problem is that I'm at the mercy of the end user, and I've seen so many original shapes go by way of the dodo bird just because they're original.
Hey, if you've got back orders for 2 years, I don't think you need to worry about that.
But
People like what you do.
It's like we did the Aura, and I love the Aura. The Aura was something I grew up playing Les Paul Juniors and Les Pauls, funny enough, but I always had my complaints about them. My first guitar, I think it was like a 56 Strat that was repainted, believe it or not, and I hated the shiny finish. I hated the fact that the neck was narrow and the bridge spacing was wide. It's like I was used to playing a Les Paul Junior where you had plenty of room
on the high
for
E.
a nice vibrato. On the high E string, you could do a downward vibrato and not
Elastic
fall off.
feel.
Yeah.
But then I'm playing this Fender and I'm like, so I was like, these things can be fixed.
Yeah.
And that's still the way I look at everything. It's like I'm always looking for better tremolo systems, like the locking system we did with Wilkinson, the locking saddles. I know that's the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Trevor, got to do this.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for something new, but no, I'm not nearly done yet. But I do kind of think it's funny. The only thing that I'm kind of wondering, talking to Kevin about, is like with something like the Ombre, I am just a huge Billy Gibbons fan, and in all my research, I was like, I see these pictures and I go, I think that's a Brown Deluxe, and then when I bought one, so I bought a Brown Deluxe, and I'm like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. I guarantee he's using this. So the funny thing is that some of the things I'm into doing is taking something that was done, but doing it more reliably, it's like more better. It's like even when I was at Fender, that was my job for Clapton. He had this low power Tweed Twin, and Cesar Diaz had modified it, rest his soul. And Eric loved that amp, it's just that it wasn't reliable. So my job at Fender was make this amp for Eric reliable, and make him 3 of them, 4 of them. And so that's what I did there. And I thought that was really cool, just to kind of go, well, you know what? It doesn't sound quite the same. There's something different. And we'd take, Lee Dixon and I would take the head shell, the head out of one.
Wasn't it to do with the cabinet?
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah. So I'm going like, well, geez, I had an original Triad engineer who made the transformers originally make the transformers for Eric, and they were like $350 a pop back then. And he didn't care how many I ordered. Just, that's what they cost. Yeah. And so, I nailed everything on that amp. I blueprinted it, and it still didn't sound quite the same. Had the same guy recone the same speakers, who was their keyboard tech. Finally, we took the head out. Let's swap the heads. let's put mine in Eric's falling apart,
Cabinet, yeah.
tweed, falling apart tweed cabinet. And yeah,
It was the
the
pine
sound
cabinet,
stayed
yeah.
with the cabinet.
Yeah.
So then we started to realize that wood is important. It's really important.
It's amazing, isn't it? The difference that would make.
Yeah, and then we wound up making it like out of 200-year-old pine, and just
Make it even more expensive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nobody really has those amps except him.
No.
I think the last one sold for 50,000 or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's next limited release amp. It's available exclusively through Peach.
Well, actually, the hard thing.
I've got him going now.
My hardest thing about that amp was the chrome chassis. Making the amp wasn't the problem. It was
Yeah.
that chrome was a nightmare.
I'm sure you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Another
I
job
think
for the list.
The answer to the question is you're just a guitar nut still.
I'm a
Who
guitar
happens to
nut.
run the
I
factory.
always have been, and it's the reason I can't. Even though I try, I can't get off of the gear page. I can't
know.
get off of these things because I'm not there because I'm trying to sell anybody my shit.
No.
I'm a guitar geek like everyone else. I've got a full-on pedal board. I've got our upstairs room is full of amplifiers and guitars. I just bought a Les Paul Jr. And, I'm a gear guy. I love gear.
Well,
Same.
Yeah,
And
him too.
I think there's like
He's got 2 rooms. He's got 2 rooms where one is his bedroom and the other bedroom is just all gear. It's a studio.
I think we have no shortage of ideas and desires and things that like we want to do this, we want to do this. Even a lot of stuff already in the pipeline. It's just I think him and I both wear a bunch of hats here, and
But
so
the products that you make, they're fantastic solutions, aren't they, for guitarists? They're not necessarily like, we're going to go out of our way to try and like reinvent the wheel. It has to be
Why?
this. Yeah, you don't need to do that. You've like the classic S, like that guitar. It has the stainless steel frets. It has hum cancelling. It stays in tune. And it sounds.
And the string spacing.
Yeah.
The strings sit on the neck correctly, so you don't feel like you're slipping off. Because I always thought it was kind of crazy that a Gibson has a wider neck at the butt
Yeah.
than a Fender, but the Gibson's got a narrower string spacing than the Fender,
Yeah.
considerably.
Yeah.
Like our need for 53 millimeter on a Fender space, or even anything over 2 1/8, compared to a Gibson, it's 50 millimeter spacing bridge. So I always thought those things are the things that bug me. Like if I could make that S-style guitar that I could actually get high-end access, and the strings were nicely lined
Yeah,
up.
not falling off the
And
board.
then, and then we level the fingerboards under string tension, so it's the same as if you had a set of strings on it. Those are all like the little things that make it a better performer. I want somebody to be able to buy my. Back in the '80s, I got a great compliment from Steve Stevens. He said, I can take your guitar from your shop and go right across the street to the studio and just start tracking. And that
you can't
gives
ask
me
for more than that.
That gives me the greatest sense of pride.
Yeah.
I'm not out to make the most original looking guitar or come up with something that hasn't been done before.
But we're not ready to embrace that, are we?
No,
That's the
I
thing.
want to make a better tool
Yeah.
for you to make music, because to me that's where I think a lot of guys lose sight, is like, what's going to help me be creative and make music without aggravation? If I've got to listen to snap, crackles, pops, noises, ground loops, hums from my single coil, and of course if you play in a vacuum, single coils are not a problem. If you play in a battery powered amp in the desert, you won't hear any noise from a single coil. It's fine. But it's all this stuff going around us
It's the
that
world.
will get you in the end.
Well, I can only thank you guys for taking that approach, because I speak for myself and a lot of other players where I can make a living out of music largely thanks to your guys' products.
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
think that applies to a lot of people, and that's what I love so much about the brand, is that you've done all the thinking for us, and now we just have to do the right thing with the tools that you make.
you
So
just got to write the melodies and the chord progressions.
yeah, that's the
Yeah, you have to do what I
that's the
didn't do.
difficult part. Yeah. Well, we'll see. But yeah, I think anything else you wanted to talk
No,
about?
I think that's we've covered a lot of bases there, haven't we?
Certainly
That's,
have. Apart from actual basses themselves, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, that's coming too.
There was one around here.
I
In the
saw one
room.
earlier, but I didn't know if we should talk about that.
But for the coming time, I think after we're done cleaning up and increasing our efficiencies, I think in this next year, Kevin and I are going to have some time to get back into R&D, and you're going to see new guitars, you're going to see new pedals, you're going to see.
You're taking the right approach, because there's there's a lot of companies that are still just releasing new products while they've got a massive back order, and customers just end up getting disappointed because you know the new product is going to take so long, and the guitar they've already got on order is taking longer and longer to be made and stuff. So it is the right approach. It's cool to be innovative and try and come up with new product, and it's good for filling up the order book and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I think what you're doing right now is very important. You know, we need guitars quicker. So
and
the more you can do that, and amps and everything.
Amps are the thing I know.
And even the pedals, you know.
The pedals and the amps, we're pushing to be able to have them in stock.
Yeah.
So, because I understand, it's like you want something, you want it now. I waited a year for my first Boogie, and I think I was almost let down.
People will wait with guitars. Amps, it's a lot harder. One day they just, you know, hey, I need a Plexi amp with power scaling. I want to get a, you know, Badger. You know, I want to get a Badger 18. They don't want to wait 18 months, or because by then they want a Tweed Deluxe. You know, so. It's I think that's important. Guitars, you know,
guitars
they are what they are.
If you want to make a baby, it's going to take 9 months at least.
Exactly.
So.
Well, that's a great note to end on. That.
Yeah.